If you've liked the things that you've seen on the Get to Know OCD podcast and you want to know more about OCD, you can go to NOCD.com. We have tons of education. You can go to our NOCD YouTube channel and watch our webinars and other episodes of the podcast. And we hope that you will take advantage of everything that we have available to you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Get to Know OCD podcast. Very happy to have you all here. If you're looking for help for OCD or related conditions, check us out at NOCD.com. That's NOCD.com, where we have expert clinicians who have been trained to help you with OCD and things like body-focused repetitive behaviors or tics or hoarding and resulting anxiety issues, mood issues, any those types of things come along as well. Today, we are joined by Kristy Quinn. Now, Kristy, we had the chance to meet in Howie's studio.
Yes,
That was really fun.
it
And
was.
why don't you tell everybody a little bit about you and what brought you here today?
Yeah, so I'm from Chicago. I moved here about 5 years ago. I've struggled with OCD my entire life since I've been a kid. And it ultimately resulted in severe alcoholism because that's what I used to cope. And when I got sober, I decided to move to LA to pursue my dream to become a comedian. And, I am almost 7 years sober now, and I've found healthier coping mechanisms to help the OCD. And I found people like you now that have been able to help me through this and guide me, and it just makes me feel so much less alone. So I'm so happy to be here, and thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, you've shared the stage with many amazing people. You've got Tiffany Haddish, Bobby Lee, Craig Robinson, Dane Cook, and then we talked about the Howie work. What's it like, especially as a up and coming aspiring comedian, to be on stage with these massive names? I mean, there's got to be a lot of pressure, which could kick off both maybe some OCD thoughts and maybe some urges or cravings for a drink or something like that too, once in a while, I would think.
It's so exciting. I
Okay.
can't sometimes I'll look at my arms and the hairs just stick up from excitement. Like it is just the most magical life I could have ever imagined for
Mm-hmm.
myself. And I have a lot of comedians that ask me, they'll say, what are your plans for the future? What do you want? What do you want to do? Where do you want to go from this? And I say to them, I don't have an answer for that because what I want is to enjoy this moment. I want to enjoy this present moment and be where I am and enjoy the moment that I'm in. Because I feel like a lot of people forget how special it is when they're in something and how far they've come to make it. And so I remind myself that every time I step up on the stage, and it's such a mix of excitement and fear, and I mean, it can be so scary, but the more you do it, and the more that you get to know people, and the more familiar you get, the more comfortable you get, and then those symptoms start to shrink.
Yeah.
So it's discipline, it's consistency, and it's believing in yourself and gratefulness. I'm so grateful. I am so happy. And I cannot tell you how many times I've cried from happiness on the drive home from these shows,
Mm-hmm.
just from how far I've come and just the ability to do this with this intense anxiety and OCD, and to know that I'm up there fully sober, present in the moment, and just able to do that and show people that it's possible. It's remarkable.
So there's so many areas to go with that, because OCD would like you to live in the past and worry about how you did something wrong and how it's going to come back to haunt you, or in the future and think
Right.
about all the things you haven't figured out yet and how those might harm you. But you're
Exactly.
describing now living in the moment. What's it
Yes.
like looking at your old life to today, being able to do that?
It's completely different. I mean, I think they say you change about every 7 years, right? But when I look at my life, when I struggled with alcoholism, I mean, I was a mess. I did not have any of the thoughts I had now. I mean, I was thinking completely wrong. I didn't understand, first of all, I didn't really understand what was going on with me. So that was very hard for me to comprehend, the OCD, like what was going on. So I was always confused. I just thought that I had all these problems and no one talked about it. It was always very secretive. And so, I never like was able to deep dive into it because I was so deep into my alcoholism that my brain wasn't able to function clearly enough to be able to, go through these wild transformations of, change and growth, and to be able to be out in the world and just experience and see how different and beautiful life can be when you grow and change and work on yourself. So just completely different.
And then with alcohol, I mean, the whole goal is to pretty much numb everything. And
Yes.
now you experience everything. So
Hmm.
that's also got to be just mind blowing in some ways, I
Oh,
assume.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's wild. It's, I mean, when I first started comedy, I was so terrified. I remember it was an 8-minute set and it was just at a bar. And I was worried for weeks prior. And I will never forget, I went to my bathroom and I sat on my toilet so no one could hear me. And I let out the loudest scream, like cry of
Mhm.
deep, deep fear from the gut. Just terrified, terrified, counting all day long, just like touching, kind of waiting for the minute that it happened.
Mhm.
But then, the more you do it, love is always bigger than fear.
Sure.
It always is. So I remind myself of that. And I knew it would get better. So I was like, I just have to get past this hump. I know I can do it. And then the more I started doing it, and it was always hard, it got easier. And it still is hard. But now I'd say it's more of an excitement than a fear, which I'm
Yeah.
so grateful to say, because I can't believe I've reached this point, because it's been so challenging, and I'm just so grateful that I've been able to make it to this point.
So you grew up in Chicago. Where in Chicago are you from? What
Yeah.
neighborhood? Yeah.
So my parents are actually from a south suburb called Lansing. It's a
Oh,
little,
Lansing. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
sure.
it's
Hmm.
like it's on the border of Indiana.
Yeah.
And then I actually moved. I went to Illinois State. I moved right after college
Little
to,
Bloomington normal.
yeah, it's a
Maybe a
cornfield town.
burrito as big as your head at some point in time in your life there. Yeah.
Yeah, a
Okay.
couple times. Exactly. Yeah. So then I went to college, and yeah, then I moved downtown after that for about 10 years, lived like right in River North, that
Mhm.
area. I was a bartender for a while, which of course didn't help with the
Yeah.
alcoholism,
Free
because I was,
shots. Yeah.
yeah, free
Hmm.
shots. I was a
Hmm.
fun drunk. I
Hmm.
was never like a sad or depressed one, which kind of always made me feel like it was kind of okay,
Sure. Sure.
always being surrounded by it. But once you're not in that, I think a lot of it was environmental,
Yeah.
because now, I think the base of what I've realized is I don't think I was ever really an alcoholic. I had an alcohol problem,
Okay.
but the real problem was the anxiety and OCD. And
Hmm.
that was my band-aid to fix
Sure.
it.
That was your coping strategy, right?
That was it. And so
Hmm.
I think that's a misconception a lot of people have. And that's why there's so many judgments, is because they're like, oh, you're just an alcoholic. And it's like, no, there's way deeper problems. And that's why I'm so kind to people, because you just never know what someone's going through. And so many people suffer in silence.
So tell me about the genesis of OCD in your life. Was it always there? Did you notice the development of it? Was there a moment that was like this aha experience? What was it like for
It was all, I mean, I remember, man, it's been my whole life. I mean, I remember in grade school, I went to a Catholic grade school, and I started having like these crazy intrusive thoughts about like God and Jesus that I was very shameful about. Like I had like sexual images, and that made me think that I would go to hell. And I would sweat through all of my clothing. Like I would always have to go places 30 minutes before and bring a change of clothes. I mean, I literally, this is insane, but hilarious. I would put duct tape under my armpits so they would stop sweating
Wow.
because I couldn't stop. I mean, and no one knew. And I mean, at some points in my life, I would only wear black. I looked like a groundskeeper. Like it was, it was hilarious because, and I would take jobs that only allowed that, like bartending. That's why I like doing that. And I remember there were certain times when, like, if my arm touched, and I still do this till this day, say my left arm touched something, but my right arm didn't.
Oh,
I had to have that balance. Otherwise, someone in my family might die that day.
yes.
And that's when I realized that OCD is very closely related to what and who you love.
Yes.
And I always remembered, like, I always had to sit in the back of my classrooms because I was so scared I was going to blurt something crazy out. I was just so afraid that because like people thought I had Tourette's because growing up I had this like wild like tick in my eye that I still get sometimes.
Okay.
And I do. I mean, it's just become such a part of me that there's so many things I do now that I don't even realize I'm doing them. Like one example out of thousands is whenever I leave my house, I have to look in the mirror 3 times. Otherwise I'll have a bad day. Or when I'm driving in the car, I have to squeeze the steering wheel 3 times, or otherwise I'll get in an accident. There's just, I count everything. I count the words people say. I count signs. I count billboards. I'm adding and subtracting all day long. It's exhausting.
Sure.
I can't even read books because I'll read the letters and the words in the sentences, and then the sentences in the paragraphs, and then I add them all up.
Okay.
So, and it's been such a challenge. I've tried Audible, but then I start counting the words they're saying on Audible. So it's very interesting. It's one of my friends was like, maybe it's just a way of life for you.
One of the ways that I go about often treating what you were describing is I'll create a loop tape of random numbers that you have to listen to while you're doing something else and counting. And
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that would be great. Oh my goodness. Yes.
Yeah. So there's treatment for that, which is really cool that we've even come up with some things to deal with those. So I don't think you're off the table for reading books. We can get you back there if that's something
That's
that you're
great.
you're
That would
interested
be
in.
wonderful.
For sure. Yeah,
That would be
that's awesome.
so great. Yes. Yeah, that would be great.
So OCD has this counting thing for you. You've got the symmetry. Where does the alcohol kind of start in your life as a way to manage some of this? How does that all get to that point?
So I started early on. I remember it was crazy because I'm so good with people, and I know I was class president, and like no one knew how bad I was suffering because OCD is a form of anxiety, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I've gathered, it is a form of anxiety. So I've been misdiagnosed many times with general anxiety disorder because I've fallen many times. Once I hit my head on a frying pan and had to go to the ER. So people were confused as to like what exactly I had. So I remember early on in high school, since alcohol is legal, I remember specifically being at my house, and because social anxiety is a big thing for me, and just leaving the house and counting because I would do that a lot before I'd leave. And I remember sitting with my brother because he would try to help me through it. And he would try to like scare me and like try to like get it out of me. And I'd be like, listen, I have to drink. I have to get this to go away. And it was the only thing that made it stop for me. But I didn't want to tell people in high school because when people are that young, they just don't understand.
Sure.
They don't really comprehend. And even if they do, they're not open to discussing it because they don't want to, admit it either, or they're very scared of it. So, over time, it got worse. It just got, I was drinking day and night. I'm talking severe alcoholism. I remember when I used to work corporate jobs in Chicago when it was the worst, I would literally go to the bathroom and just pound like half a fifth of vodka and then just go sit back at my desk
Mm-hmm.
because like the ticking and I couldn't handle the reading the emails and counting the numbers and the
Sure,
letters.
sure.
And it was so much for me that I could not handle it. And I had been on meds at many points in my life,
Mm-hmm.
but they made me not me. They made me very like quiet and weird. And not to say that alcohol was better
Yeah.
because it was obviously worse, but at the time it just felt like, you know, it was just what worked for me at the time, but of course destroyed me in the long
Yeah.
run. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up so OCD and anxiety, in things have
Mm-hmm.
changed interestingly in the diagnostic manual. In DSM-4, the former version of the diagnostic manual, it was listed under anxiety disorders. Now in the fifth version, it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
separated out into its own condition along with related things like what you've described, even tics, right? And
Right.
body focused repetitive behaviors, so skin picking or hair pulling.
Yes, the skin
Uh,
picking I
yeah.
do. Yes.
Yep. So
Yes.
that's commonly associated with OCD. But you are also correct that one of the most unfortunately common things to happen is people are just diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder because there's still a lot of therapists that don't recognize the compulsive nature of the things people do, or people with
Correct.
OCD aren't always forthcoming on some of those. It might seem embarrassing to talk about some of those things
Yes.
to a therapist. And so
Yes.
yeah, if you don't say them, then it's going to be hard to pick out OCD for sure. What was that
Right.
embarrassment like for you, and how did you finally kind of break through and talk more openly about
You know what's interesting? I think the comedian in me
it? Okay,
was never really like when I was younger.
sure.
I was more embarrassed because when you're young, you don't know anything yet. But as I got older, you know what's interesting about me, and what I think probably makes me a great comedian is that I kind of like to suffer. I'm good at it.
Hmm.
I really am. And the more that I started opening up about it and just talking about it. Like now when I meet people, I literally say, I go, "Hi, I'm Kristy and I have OCD. How are you?" Just because it takes its
Hmm.
power away.
Yeah,
And then it allows people to feel safe with me, to know that they can talk about. And I've had so many people when I do that be like, "Me too." And then we've had beautiful conversations and they thank me and they're like, "I'm so glad that you opened up to me because I have no one to talk to this about." So, I think like it disarms it when you bring it up and when you bring humor to it and when you tell people it's not that serious and it can be a superpower if you make it. And if you can channel it in the right ways, it can actually become a really, really beautiful thing.
yeah.
Truly.
How do you deal with people who say things to you like, "Oh, I have a little OCD too," versus, "Oh, I really have OCD"? Because there's a
Mhm.
big difference there.
Right. I actually, I don't really mind because I realize that they don't deeply understand. A lot of people, unless you have it as severe as I do, it's very hard for people to comprehend, what I go through on a daily basis. So for me, I don't get upset. It's more of just, it's a lack of understanding. It's not really their fault. You know, at times, it can be a little frustrating because it's like, this has ruined my life. But again, a deep understanding of people not really understanding and just not having the knowledge of really what it is because there's such a spectrum and it's so different for so many people.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Do you bring OCD into your comedy work? I mean, obviously OCD is not a joke itself, but
Yeah.
how do you work that in as a part of who you are? Because great comedians, of course, are vulnerable and talk about themselves and their lives and their journeys and their foibles and things of that nature.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I've definitely I've worked it into my act a little bit. I'm still pretty new. I'm about 2.5 years in, but I talk about it and I make jokes about it in my act. And it's interesting because people will come up to me after and talk to me about it.
Yeah.
And it's really cool because it's cool to get that out into the universe. And, I really, really love doing stand up because it makes me feel like I have a worth, because I make people feel good even though I feel horrible all of the time. And that's what keeps me going. Knowing that I can use that comedy to help people who are suffering because I can handle it. I have a strong core. And I think that that's what I was made for. And I think that my power, it may even be higher than comedy. It may be something even bigger than that. It may be even, helping people in bigger ways than I could have ever dreamed of. Because I feel very strong right now. And I really, really want to help people.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You obviously hit a low point, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm wondering, and again, as much as you're willing to describe that, but what
Yeah.
brought you to that? And some people don't make it through that. Some people, we lose people,
Yes.
right? At times,
Yes.
suicide is out there. Alcohol poisoning can happen in people's
Yeah.
lives. How did you hit that, and how did you come back from it?
Yeah. So it was really one of the wildest, if not the most wild experience of my life. So I did turn into a full-blown alcoholic, and I went through delirium tremens, which a lot of people don't know what that is. It's also known as the DTs,
Yeah.
which is, it only happens to 5% of all alcoholics, just to describe how severe it is. So when I tell that to people, they're like, oh, is it because you drank too much or overdosed? I'm like, no, it's because I stopped drinking.
Right.
Because when I was drinking so much chronically for so long every day, that when I stopped, my body was like, where is it? Because I was chemically addicted to alcohol.
Yeah.
So when that happened, I had 2 grand mal seizures that landed me in the ER. I was actually with my mom and my sister when it happened, luckily. And I remember waking up in the ER, and I didn't know where I was, and I had lost memory. I didn't know where I lived. And that lasted for a few weeks. I mean, it came back, but it was, after the first one, I forgot to mention, I flatlined. And I came back and I had another one. And I remember waking up in the hospital bed with these paddings next to me. And it was one of the scariest. I mean, my face was blue. Like my lips were blue. I died, essentially. I mean, the fact that I'm here right now is, it's God. There is a reason I'm here. And when that happened to me, I got back to my roots and I said, I know who I am and I know what I have to offer. I am a good person, and this is not who I am. So not only did I start helping people, I lived with my parents for a year.
Okay.
And I got rid of all of my party friends. I started doing things like knitting. Like I just started getting back to my roots. I started, helping people. I started volunteering at hospitals. I started eating healthy and working out and doing all these things that I should have been doing in the first place instead of drinking. And it helped. And it made me stronger. And it really, 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 really guided me to the person I am today. Because a lot of people, when they get sober, it's hard for them. And I understand that. It's very hard to change.
Yeah.
Change is hard. And people are very resistant to it. But for me, I saw it as something that had to be done.
Sure.
So when I did all these great things, and when I really wanted to just do it all, because I wanted to become just resilient and powerful and someone that was able to be a resource for people so they can come to me. So when I did all those things, I got the strength to move to LA. And when I came out here, it took me a couple of years, and then that's when I started stand up.
And then you had to face going back into a bar.
Yeah, yeah, which is interesting because I haven't had any urges, knock on wood, to drink.
Hmm.
It's very interesting. I haven't had one.
Cool.
And again, hitting 7 years, which I think again is the reason because the real problem was the OCD.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think, a lot of it was experiential. Not to say that I won't have those cravings in the future
Sure.
because you never know.
Hmm.
But I've been lucky so far. And I just pray to God every day that it stays this way so I can be as strong as I am.
And then how about in terms of treatment for OCD?
Hmm.
What has that been like for you? What have you done and how has it helped?
Yeah, so I've been in and out of therapy many times in my life. I remember going to regular therapy early on, and it actually made it worse for
Mm-hmm.
me
Yeah.
because I was just talking in circles. And I just remember leaving and just feeling like hollow and empty. And because there were no answers. And I
Yeah.
was like, why? And then I would just overthink things like, why am I here? And why am I just talking to myself about things I already know? So it wasn't until I found this amazing therapist. I mean, they had to go to like the boss's boss to help me. I'm like, does,
Hmm.
does this poor woman have to go back to school because of me? Like, this
Yeah.
is intense. But so I eventually discovered ERP therapy, which helped me tremendously because this therapist was outrageously wonderful. We would make lists together and she had a toolbox for me. So
Hmm.
she would say like, hey, let's start with like, you know, the scariest things to you, maybe start with the lowest and then we'll work our way to the top.
Awesome.
So like the lowest one, and it's so silly. It's ridiculous. Like it would be like getting my nails done. Cause I've like, no, I like, don't like people touching me. Like I feel guilty. I don't like, I'm a very weird person. I'm a very secluded. I have social anxiety. Like it's hard for me to do things. It's hard, there's been times when I haven't been able to leave my house. There's been
Sure.
time, it's, so we would work through these lists and, sometimes it would just be going to sit at Target and just sit there and have a coffee
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
see how I feel, see how I feel. And there's been other times I've had like weird things with germs where she's had me lick the bottom of like my shoe to like, which is outrageously hilarious, but it worked. I mean, and because a lot of these things, and I remember her saying to me once, she was like, Kristy, do you really think if you don't organize your closet a certain way that your mom's going to die? Do you really think that? And I was like, no. And it only took those words of her saying that for
There you
me to
go.
just be like,
Hmm.
duh. I just needed someone to say that to me, even though I knew it. Her words were powerful to me.
Yeah.
So and it was almost like having a friend because she guided me so well through this process that it was just such a relief. And I'm so grateful for her. And
Yeah.
it changed my life. It
How
changed everything.
prior to ERP, and I love the ERP success story. So thank you for
Thank
sharing
you.
that.
Of
Prior
course.
to ERP, may I gamble that much of your life was led by two words, and those two words were "what if," followed by whatever worst case scenario your brain could come up with.
Every time.
Hmm.
Every time. It was never, I mean, I've had, earlier this year, I had insomnia so bad. I was up for 3 days at a time, overthinking, just like, because I've been in and out of ERP therapy, but I
Hmm.
went through a very traumatic event just this past year where I went through a very hard time. And, the thoughts in the insomnia were so, so bad. I mean, I could not sleep, and I was just, I was having night thrashes and terrors, and just waking up with, I could literally wring out my shirts from sweating through the night.
Hmm.
And it was I got down to 109 pounds. I was taking shots of olive oil to gain weight.
Mhm.
I mean, it was serious. It was very, very bad. And, I always remind myself that those things can always come back and happen and to be prepared for those. So that's when I got back into therapy and
Good.
I started talking, and it helped because, when I got back into it, it helped because then I started thinking more about the positive and I can handle this. And I started taking things off my plate that made it hard for me to sleep at night. Because when you say no, there's power in that. And I realized the more I said no to things, the easier my life got and the more I had control.
So how do you balance all of that now? Therapy, working comedian, what's your go-to on a daily basis to make sure you're keeping yourself in good mental shape?
Yeah, so I'd say my base is diet.
Okay.
I truly believe in the power of, and it's hard for me to talk about that because, it's kind of like religion and politics, right? Like people don't like to be told what to eat. It's annoying. I get
Sure.
that. I understand that. But for me, my diet has changed my life. I
Hmm.
eat so healthy and I truly believe in the effects that it has in the brain. I don't do it for vanity. I do it for my mental well-being
Yeah.
because I've read studies on it and I've read just how powerful it can and just repair the brain and help you. And it just makes you feel better and good. And I work out, I take walks, I listen to music, I meditate, I call friends, I'm out in the community, I talk to people. And, one of the biggest things that helps is just helping other people. That's what helps me because then I feel good knowing that I am able to give that away to someone because I truly believe what love is to me is when you're struggling but you're still able to help people.
Sure.
And so that's what I'm currently doing, and that's what I want to give away. That's what I want to continue to do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it feels good to you to do, of course, which is nice.
Very
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Hmm.
I actually started making, I make these little mental health care packages for people. I started making them over the pandemic. And they're just little boxes. I've made them for strangers. And I just put in stuff that helps them with anxiety, like coloring books, because it helps to use your hands, and I just write handwritten notes and I just put stuff in there that might help them. And I have a typewriter where I'll write cool quotes and and I'm I'm here for you, reach out to me. And so I've sent out a lot of those to people and people are like, make it a business. And I'm like, no, because that makes it less cool. This is something that I do for me.
You
This is
love it.
something that,
Yeah.
yeah, it's something that it not only helps me, but the one of the greatest joys of my life is when people send me videos of them opening it and seeing them tear up.
Hmm.
It's the greatest feeling in the world.
So you're finding your passion now because
Yeah.
for a while OCD was your passion. Unfortunately,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's a really shit passion, by the way, as you could
It
probably
really
agree.
is.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
What do you wish you knew about OCD? If you could go back to that little kid in Lansing, Illinois, and say to her now, what would you tell her?
You know, I would just be like, you're not insane.
Hmm.
I would just be like, your brain is just wired differently than other people's, and that's okay. One of my favorite quotes is life is like a flute. It may have many holes and emptiness, but if you work on it carefully, it can play magical melodies.
Hmm.
And so I think about that a lot because if you're just sitting with OCD and you're doing nothing, right, your life is going to be empty. But if you fill it with all these beautiful things, and if you start doing things and working on yourself, and you start growing into the person you know you are, and you channel this OCD into what you know it can be, then you can just be this amazing person who can help people. And that's what I'd tell myself as a kid. And I would just tell myself, you're not alone. You're going to be okay. And you're going to make it. And you're going to help people. And you're going to change the world.
Yeah. So knowing you have the ability to overcome something tough and to apply that to other areas in your life, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And moreover that, just help people because so many people suffer again in silence. I mean, I saw this image of this man online and it just showed his head and it showed his brain. And the image in his brain was of him curled up in a ball, but there was a smile on his face. And I feel like that's so many people where, we're out in the world and everyone's just trying to put this face on and act like it's okay. But life is hard. Life is very hard. And it's a daily input where you have to work and put in the work. Mm-hmm. And so, for me, it's helping people get through that and seeing people like me and knowing that it's possible.
Yeah. Because I'm assuming you, like almost everyone else I've ever interviewed, would not wish OCD on your worst enemy by any means.
Never.
Yeah.
Never. It can be so painful. Just torture. Just a torture chamber. Horrifying stuff.
So there's people out there right now, they're struggling, they're listening to this.
Mm-hmm.
What's your you don't know them, so you don't have your typewriter ready to send them a message. But what is your podcast inspirational experience message thing that you want to give them right now?
Yeah. So I actually wrote a little thing. I do have a lot to say about this.
Please.
I would tell them.
The floor is yours.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. First I would tell them, start talking to people about it. Because when you do, it takes its power away. Don't hide it. It's one of the most beautiful things about you. Even if you don't see it now, I promise that it is. And whatever you do, do not sit still. Because OCD can be paralyzing. It can be paralyzing to the core. I've had days where I've just sat and laid for hours on end, just thinking the darkest thoughts possible. Take your feelings that you're having, use them for good, help the community, volunteer, do things with your hands, talk to your friends and family. It really helps to help people, and just know that you are not alone. And most of all, you have to be brave. Being brave doesn't mean that you won't be scared. You're going to be scared with OCD every single day. But being brave means being scared and doing it anyway. That's what being brave is. And just know there's going to be so many ups and downs. It's not linear. You're going to go through so many hard times and so many ups and downs. But when the ups are good, they're so good and they're so strong. And, I heard this recently and it's true. Life is a fight and it's not about the end goal. So many people think it is. But your character gets built during the war on the way to the top, on that journey to that goal. Because, we're broken down over and over and over again. But it's in our human nature to get back up and to do it again and to show ourselves that we can do it. Because that's why we're here. We have one chance and you cannot give up no matter how many times it takes. And you will not suffer alone. We suffer together. Mm-hmm. That's what we do. And if you do it with integrity, with love, with honesty, with gratitude and gratefulness, you will not fail. Celebrate your friends' wins. Never compare yourself to others. Be good. Be a good person. Care about people. Take care of them. Be positive. Spread light. And just know OCD is not who you are. It's just a part of you. And just like OCD, like I said with the flute quote, if you do nothing with it, nothing will happen. Yeah. And lastly, I would just tell them that you are uniquely beautiful. Your soul is beautiful, and you have so many talents that the world wants to see. So don't hide it. Be in the world because it's a beautiful place to be.
I think of My favorite band is Rush. No shock to
Cool.
anyone listening here, but there's a song, Prime Mover, and one of the lines is, "The point of the journey is not to arrive. Anything can happen." And I think it
Hmm.
goes, when you were talking about that, it popped into my head of,
Yeah,
yeah, I like that. Just enjoy the journey and see where it goes,
exactly. Yeah.
where it takes you. And your journey
Hmm.
has taken you probably in places you never thought as a child you would be. I'm
Right.
assuming as a little girl you weren't like, I'm going to be a comedian out in LA and sharing stages with big people.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah. 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 It's cool. I mean, you just got to take your shot and just realize that if you never do, nothing will change. And you just have to believe in yourself.
Yeah.
And you just have to just every day work on yourself and just know that it's going to get better.
Well, we're thrilled you worked on yourself, and we're thrilled for the doctors who worked on you, and that you're back
Thank
with us.
you.
You're here. You've been to hell and back, right? And
Right. Yeah.
we're so thankful to have had some time with you today. So thank you, Kristy. Tell everyone
Thank
where
you.
they can find you, or get some info about you.
Yeah, so I perform all over LA. I'm usually at the Hollywood Improv, the Laugh Factory, the Ice House, the Comedy Store, and my Instagram is Kristy Quinn Comedy. You can find me there. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristy. And thank
Yeah.
all of you for joining us today on the Get to Know OCD podcast. If you like the Get to Know OCD podcast, you can subscribe on the NOCD YouTube channel or anywhere where you get your favorite podcasts. And if you're looking for help for OCD or related conditions, check us out at nocd.com. That's NOCD.com, where we have expert therapists who have been trained to help you, licensed in the states and places you are at, to work with you. So we hope to hear from you soon. Thanks again. We'll see you in the future.